But to start with, as we have been doing the last number of weeks, we're going to take a look at the Six Nations games that have just gone. Round 2. Again, 3 winners, 3 losers, and
the usual affair.
The usual affair, and we're going to start with the Ireland game. The Ireland game in Murrayfield against Scotland, which they won.
Yes.
22 points to 13 on Saturday afternoon.
Yep, a good place to start, as it was the first game of the weekend as well in sequence, wasn't it? It was.
Was indeed.
Ireland back to winning ways. Not vintage performance-wise. Definitely a few more question marks raised in the interim, as there are always going to be after like a week 1 result like that. It's going to be just hanging over the rest of the tournament now and beyond. That result, to be honest, is going to linger all year.
Materially, it has an impact on the tournament as well, just because it doesn't seem possible that Ireland can win the tournament after just that 5-0 defeat.
Yeah, and the failure to acquire a 4-try bonus point in Murrayfield, which is obviously pre-kickoff. That's such a tough ask, but in the context of that game, it felt like it was possibly there as well. Yeah. There was
absolutely there.
Well, it was, they kicked that penalty to kind of push themselves just out at arm's length, where they felt more comfortable. But obviously, an alternative approach to that penalty is to kick to the corner.
I'd say the boys will recognise that when they look back on it in the review, or probably having already done so. It was one of those where after the game, Murray Best was talking about it. He found the game quite confusing. Obviously, stop-start. It was a Roman Poit game, which has its own connotations. You know, there was a little bit of confusion with how the game was being.
Laidlaw was calling them out in the post-match.
Whatever to be said about that, but it was stop-start, and there was a lot of confusion, and Ireland just felt uneasy, and they knew they couldn't afford to lose this week, and they just wanted to get it done. I think when they look back on it in the review, like they'll probably start to realise just how off Scotland were, and how how there for the taking they were, and in the context of the match, they just felt like, let's win it. Scotland are dangerous. Let's just get over the line here. Yeah.
Which, to be honest, is a refreshing enough take in a World Cup year where we're going to be in their pool anyway. Like, it's not a bad thought to go to Murrayfield with, giving them their due, considering the last time we went there. Like, a lot was said of us having an off day again. That narrative does seem to recur in many as a defeat. But
what is a defeat if not an off day?
No, this is it. True. It's like, it's not your best day if you didn't win. But like, there was a lot that Scotland got right that day, and they were a lot more dangerous, I felt, than they were in this instance. Even though Finn Russell probably had a really good game from 10, they did look dangerous at times. Some of their probing, attacking, kicking did scare us at points, but the net result of it, because compounding that with the fact that they dropped a lot of ball and couldn't get through phases a lot, it kind of felt like even with the probing kicks that looked dangerous for a time, maybe they would have been better off holding the ball for a little longer, because they just couldn't seem to get anything going.
Able to. I mean, they did kick it a little too much, but they also made loads of errors, as you say, and it was just... Yeah, outside of that long attacking set towards the end of the half, which would have been huge if they'd managed to get over.
And what was actually huge anyway in the context of Ireland, looked really felt that was their highlight of that game. I'd say that's going to be their big strong takeaway, because they do pride themselves on their defence, and like they shipped 4 tries at home the week before.
And Murray Best was harking back to that set. I think in his post-match interview was a good one. It was Stockdale's tackle in the corner. Carney shot up by, I think it was on Seymour, I want to say, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it would have been.
And it just feels like it should have been on that wing. And it saved the try, and Scotland couldn't get it done, and that was essentially as close as Scotland got to generating any kind of continuity in attack.
Yeah, and the game was already getting away from them before the Russell interception as well. It was kind of felt like Ireland were exerting some control, even despite Sexton going off and Hogg going off. Yeah, you're right in saying there were just disruptions aplenty, but it was like Ireland are the more patient side of those two, so it felt like the game was going in such a way that it was always going to benefit Ireland rather than the fast and loose pace that Scotland would want to be playing with. And as such, like, it didn't get broken up enough, and players like Hugh Jones really weren't in the game in an impactful kind of way.
The only way he was with a couple of errors, and it was for the Scots it was a curious.
It was baffling watching from that kind of
angle. It was,
angle
to be honest with you, like, if I we ponder on it from our waters. If I was a Scottish rugby fan, I'd be pretty flat. Yeah, because it was like they have this very, very difficult World Cup draw. That probably not much is going to come of it. It's probably a quarterfinal exit. Is almost certainly that's how it's going to go for them. Yeah, and this was a year then where every other team was probably a little bit more focused perhaps in the World Cup than maybe the Scots have a little bit of liberty to focus on the Six Nations. They've been bridesmaids for years. They've got that start against Italy where they got 4 tries and 5 points on the board, leading the Six Nations going into it, and then to come out so flat. It was, especially in attack, it was sort of, you saw that those problems that Italy obviously couldn't expose, or you couldn't learn anything from that Italy game that we pondered might be there, just from Laidlaw and Russell hadn't played together obviously in playing for Clermont and Racing, and then there's Edinburgh players to be moulded with Glasgow players, and stylistically they were perhaps a little bit lost as well. Defensively they did start well. They started with a bit of hustle, they were attacking Ireland behind the gain line, they were getting some good chop tackles in, but that just sort of faded as the game went on.
A lot of their forward carriers, the difference between their first half performance and their second half performance was kind of marked by just a general fatigue.
They did their defense leans on turnovers.
It does, and their first one didn't come till the 60th minute.
That's right. Yeah, Jamie Ritchie got one in the game, but the absence of Hamish Watson obviously massive.
And the focus that Ireland put again on their ruck ball, going back to the fundamentals of their game after kind of being dismantled in such a way, in such a fashion by England the week before. It was always going to be a kind of a doubling down on do what got us here, what got us to where we're at, do that really, really well, worry about the rest later. And that was kind of what they did. There was it was quite a quintessential, despite the fact that it felt flat. Watching it back, there's a lot of hallmarks of Schmidt's Ireland all over that performance. There's the beautiful set piece try, there's the kind of constant regeneration of ruck ball, of semi-quick ruck ball. They couldn't quite get the quickness they wanted, but they were still forward focused, trying to get over the gain line. There were a few little niggly moments, things like Peter O'Mahony putting a shot in. There was kind of a few holds behind the ruck to try and generate some things. It was our kicking game was still loose, which is part of what contributed to us not really having the full, or feeling like there was that much control to go after the game, because they really do like to be all over a game before they go after it, and they definitely didn't feel that in Murrayfield. But there were a lot of good signs of just the roots of the game plan still being there strong.
The positives are still there for Ireland. It started, certainly it was there was one or two phases where Aki flinched into first receiver, but for the most part what they were doing in first half was off Sexton. And until Sexton went down obviously, which changed things, but even then they were playing off Carberry a bit. It was very much their attack was very much orchestrating itself as it does. So it's positive to know that they can still be there. In the context of discussing them as a World Cup contender, they're still
that's where the questions are born of. That's where the criticisms come from, which is a good place to be in as an Irish rugby fan. But also it's it's some of the criticism they came in for in week one was kind of unfounded, or overblown anyway, as it always is in a defeat of that fashion. But what we're talking about is just, this is at the end of the year now. This is when the World Cup is at. If there are still some prevailing issues, those are the ones that need to be, some glaring ones. Those are the ones that need to be solved. There's an interesting stat. I was obviously looking up a few other kind of breakdowns of the games thus far, and one stat that emerged was that Ireland, or I think it was a tweet even that emerged on it, is that Ireland have in the last few years never lost or never won a game when they had more than a 2-point deficit at half time. Yeah. More than 2-point deficit at half time, you have to go back to somewhere like 2011 before we won a game like that.
It was probably Italy.
It could have been, but I can't recall the game itself. But it's very telling about just how much of a forward runner we prefer to be. And this game, despite being stop-start, sloppy, kind of ugly to look at a lot of the time, that's the fact that Ireland were at arm's length that whole time and Scotland were the ones chasing, is probably what allowed them to kind of eke out that result in the end, despite not feeling fully accurate and losing their key playmaker, who they were using a lot in the first half, in Sexton. It's obviously going to be tougher then, but a few positives in that, just Carberry getting that many minutes, getting, like you said, one or two loose plays, Finn getting a perfect read on his pass that was very, very nervy and flat as well, but then growing into getting the chance to grow into the game and become that kind of into that flowy temperament where, and it was off loose ball that he created that try. And it's he's still got a lot to him, and the more minutes he gets like that, the better, because he can't just in preparation for the World Cup, it can't just be a game against Italy and then in you go,
No, indeed. And that is why it was probably better. Last week you talked about the failed experiment of Henshaw. It was a wild one anyway, but it's probably better that they put him in against England first, So now they know it doesn't work, and it's not going to work in 6 months.
Yeah.
So it was like, as opposed to if you chucked him in against Italy and he'd scored a couple of tries, now all of a sudden you're like, oh, he's a fullback, when he just wasn't tested there.
Kind of happened with Larmer in the autumn. Didn't he play at fullback for that game?
I thought he was a 20. No, he was a fullback. You're right.
For Italy, and then he got the nod against Argentina, and it didn't go as well for him against Argentina. And he seems to have since fallen out of favour.
Well, he hasn't fallen out of favour. He's fallen onto the bench
for that jersey. I mean, for the 15.
Yes.
Joe doesn't really want him there as that 15 option in terms of mirroring Carney in much the same way as he has like Marmion come in when Marmion has to come in and try and do Murray's job a lot of the time, which was what happened in the All Blacks game when Carney's so integral to the system and the way they play that he's just looking for options. And I can see Henshaw has played at fullback before. He's big and physical and more roaming, kind of built more similarly to Carney, but it's not enough. And his reading of the game doesn't compare to the literally like 14 seasons or so that
Rob Carney
has played in there.
Rob Carney is genuinely elite at covering the backfield, at defending in general, positionally. He's genuinely elite.
Yeah, he showed a lot of that at the weekend as well. Yeah. It was because there have been like a lot of attacking kicks paying dividends in this Six Nations, a lot more so than in Six Nations gone by. Like across the board, teams are scoring tries through them, and England are kicking the leather off the ball and getting good dividends from it. And
there's copy.
Scotland tried to do that against us. Yeah, and it didn't have the same effect while Carney was there.
Exactly, and Rob is really great at that. Yeah. It's probably a consequence of just a bit of copycat tactics in defence from Andy Farrell's style.
Yeah,
I think are probably going on. It's the sort of loosey-goosey thing France might do. Ireland are doing this. We'll vaguely set up in this shape and put centres on the wings or whatever.
Well, dear, we'll get into that.
But the criticisms of Ireland, of which I actually have several heading into a World Cup. Obviously, as you say,
with a mind to
within
the
context of exactly. Like Joe was giving out last week. He was saying, it's so fickle. We're the heroes, and then we lose one game, and we're the zeros. But I sort of think of that differently, as in it's a consequence of you who are already etched into Irish history and Irish lore as this great magician, but you've raised the bar.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Like, you want to beat the best in the world. You want to be second in the world, win a Grand Slam, go through the whole season second in the world, then beat the best in the world. You put yourself in that category.
Indeed.
And that's if the All Blacks had a home defeat to England with 4 tries conceded, getting absolutely pummeled the way we did. Yeah, you're damn right. Things would change. It wouldn't matter what would happen for the rest of the year. If that happened, that would be something else, And that's, I think it's right. But I also think more than that, it exposes, as you say, a couple of problems going behind. The Carberry thing is a curious one. I mean, I think you saw, like, I've had a running theory about Carberry that was probably enforced rather than detracted from in this week. I just think, like, he's obviously a very, very talented player. And I think when you look at Ireland's offence, I mean, last week you saw Sexton hit off the ball every time, so he couldn't follow up, couldn't get his hands back on the ball. And this week you saw him hit, even almost to a more exaggerated degree, a more clumsy, less subtle degree from the Scots. He was hit late basically every play until he had to go off.
Yeah. Happened in the last World Cup.
It happened in the last World Cup.
France.
But I think on the field, even when Sexton stays up, and he isn't going off the field injured, if he's getting rattled and he's getting rocked and he can't make it around the corner, I think we made this point last week, but I think you need a second distributor in there.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously I would have Rob as the starting fullback, but I would love to see Carberry and Sexton on the field together.
Yeah.
And I would love to see Carberry get the freedom to play from fullback. I just think he's at first, he's never looked better off there. When he plays 10, it's such a different jarring thing for Ireland. Like, he's very different from Sexton. He's very heads up on the fly. Like, he can run certain plays, but he's very much making his own calls. And now that he's establishing himself more as a 10, you can see him, and it's positive and negative, but within this Irish attack, it's just a strange side. Like, he's very much trying to hustle and do his own thing, which I just think I like it a lot. But I think it's like almost Damien McKenzie. It reminds me of a little bit. He's got that footwork. He's got that vision. He can put people into space, or he can make something happen. And he's so worth getting in the team.
Yeah.
But from 10 is where you kind of see limitations. Now, he does have a better boot than D-Mac, and a better vision as the boot.
Both a left foot and a right foot as well, which is why it's curious, because I've heard a lot of Irish pundits, that idea is being floated a bit as well, the idea of him at 15, and it's like being dismissed offhand compared to, it was being floated actually in response to the Henshaw thing. And like some of the rationales behind it was crazy to me, was where it was like, I can see the rationale in having Henshaw there, a guy who has a good kicking game, or some quote like that. I think it was Alan Quinlan made that point. And I'm like going, hang on, Joey Carberry has a better, more serious kicking game than Robbie Henshaw. Like Henshaw has a good centre's kick on him. He'd kick on the run. He does a good like outside of the boot thing that goes quite long, quite low, and can find corners, similar to what Henry Slade's been offering for England. He has that kick in him. But like as far as a multitude of kicks covering the backfield, Carberry is a way more advanced kicker of a ball.
Joey has a turn of heel on Sexton on Henshaw rather as well.
Well, he has a bit of that style of footwork, that thinking Stewie Hogg or Mackenzie as well, where he can be evasive and find space enough and time enough to get a kick away as well.
Now this is purely just in the context of Rob Kearney not being available. But Carberry where he has an advantage in our style of defending, whereby the fullback does a lot of work covering the backfield, is that he's quick. That's like Henshaw's not that quick. As Matt Williams would let you know, he's not actually that quick in those open spaces.
In terms of roaming, he's quick. Like he has a different kind of pace. His acceleration is great in terms of how he shuts down space in the centres.
In just like little meters.
He can close an 8-yard gap very quickly and make attackers doubtful.
But when he's chasing a kick in behind him,
like Owen Farrell perfectly exposed it in that game before, where you could see him kick to one side of the pitch and then regather the ball from the counter kick and then instantly go to the next side, and you can see like Henshaw covering over 100 metres of space in a few seconds, which is something you just would never have
also
to do.
There was a sense ahead the ball, and that's about it. Like he came tearing after his own infield mistaken kick and then came tearing back to cover that space. I mean, it was very much all over the place. But I think Joey Carberry would be better positioned from a defensive perspective to occupy that role,
as well as bringing something more from a counter-attack and even from a multi-phase option.
Solving especially from a multi-phase option, solving Ireland's problem of not having a second distributor and giving Ireland the ability to have that looseness and that creativity, but also have Sexton the general on the field. I think that would be massive. I think it could potentially solve a lot of our
really
problems.
Implement that kind of screenplay that most teams are utilising now as well.
Because we don't have a second
distributor. There's a little bit of pod shape to what we do, and there can be Sexton around the back, and there can be two-touch Sexton plays and stuff, but it's rare that he has a pullback option out wide who's a second distributor.
There can be, but most of the time it's a forward pod giving it back to Sexton. You rarely see Sexton as the first man in a screenplay, and that's simply because the only way that play can work is to have two dynamic, threatening distributors.
Which sometimes that is the case with Ringrose, but we don't seem to play him into the game that way. I feel like that shape is something that we're missing anyway in terms of picking teams apart. But then part of that is also just our focus on resourcing rucks so well that we are actually the best team in the world, I think, at this point, in terms of just generating proper ruck ball and resourcing that area. But it comes at a sacrifice whereby we're not as focused on support lines there and offloads, therefore support lines, and also we're just not as urgent in our need to recognize the space and go through it. We'd actually sooner see ourselves go through another 10 rucks and tire teams out.
But that's where you're getting killed, when you're not winning ruck ball and when you're behind, and that's where you need to be able to use those guys and go through those options, which is why I think it's, those two centres that we had at the weekend, Aki and Farrell, with ball in hand, simply just I don't think either of them played badly, but I just don't think they offer enough. I think you need a ball player in there, and I think it's done now, in the sense that there's no fixing it this side of the World Cup. But I think it was probably a big mistake, and hindsight's an easy thing, because I probably didn't call this at the time, but it was probably in hindsight a mistake not to have brought Rory Scannell, I think, from Munster into the mix earlier. I think all those minutes that were given to Stuart McCluskey back in the last number of years in November internationals and everything else, and all of that time that he was in camp and nothing really came of it for him. I think had those minutes been given to Rory Scannell, I think first of all you'd see a much improved Rory Scannell, and you'd have an option when Ringrose goes down for some distribution from centre. Which doesn't they're involving Bundy Aki in that role a lot, and he's doing a creditable job, but it's still not really his game, and there's still one or two. He's not doing
passes.
A top test team job.
No, there are one or two loose passes coming from him, because he's not the most distinguished passer of football, and that's Like, you can try and force him to be that way, but it's not going to compare to someone like Carberry, who's an excellent passer of a ball when he's playing with confidence and with a bit of flow. And yet, like, we've seen him occasionally line up with Sexton in Leinster colours in seasons gone by. I know he did. He played against Munster in one game where we I think it was in Thomond Park when we won a few seasons back, and he set up. There was a lovely Rory O'Loughlin try that was literally that. It was a screen move with Sexton to Carberry.
Yeah.
Carberry, bit of gas through the gap, puts in Rory O'Loughlin.
Takes the pressure off Sexton. It also gives him the license to be that second man sometimes. So Carberry can be the guy taking the initial hit, and it also gives him a new dynamic to the attack.
Yeah.
The other thing, like one of the things that I've liked that's a huge positive from Ireland and what they're doing, is how the degree to which they recognise the value of Jacob Stockdale, and they really do recognise. Like Joe Schmidt, to his credit, like as attack coach, a lot of what Ireland are doing at the moment is just playing him into the game, putting him in space and giving him the license to try and make something happen. And he's like, he's a lad full of confidence. He seems to have the opportunity, the license to make mistakes that a lot of guys in the Ireland camp don't have. But the whole back line is functioning as a machine to generate a bit of space, put Stockdale in it, and let him do things. I love it. I think that's a real positive, and I think that we could use it, especially with Rob Kearney by himself covering the backfield, doing a lot of our defensive grunt work. I think that we could use probably trying to blood someone like that on the right wing. I think Larmour is my answer. I would love to see Larmour get a go on the right wing.
I think we touched on this last week. It's either Larmour or it's Adam Byrne if we're going to keep kicking in such an attacking way we want it.
That's the kicking. The kicking, is one point, but even just in the multi-phase, I think that Larmour is.
Larmour brings more from the multi-phase point of view.
And he's just
defenders beaten.
He breaks up the game if you put him in space. The damage he can do. I think it would be massive. I think it's certainly worth exploring, because as fun as it is to see Jacob doing what he's doing, a lot of what Ireland are doing with those subtle plays that are great that put him into space. They start with him, sort of hands in pockets, meandering, whistling around behind the ruck, and then, oh shit, I'm in the action, I'm running, I'm through the hole.
But he does have an excellent flake face on him.
He does.
He sells that a lot.
Really well. But teams are just going to start man marking him.
It's true. If you're just the only guy doing it. I was making that point last week, and it touches on Keith Earls, who obviously did grab his try this week, so credit to him.
Joey Carberry
made his try. But like, I do think you need more from your wingers, especially if you're a team that is built so rigidly on defensive fundamentals, where like the fullback isn't a counter-attacking option, he's a defensive anchor more so. If the two centres are kind of more defensive minded as well, because players like Rory Scannell have kind of not gotten a look in because he's erring on the side of Henshaw's first choice, and then it was Bundy Aki who can kind of match some of the physicality defensively that Henshaw brings, albeit probably a slightly lesser, that like in terms of just being dynamic and linking a bit more. I think actually Henshaw's a better passer of a ball than him as well, so it's probably slightly less, but he still does value that. And it's if you're going to be that defensive minded of a team, you kind of need two finishers on either wing, really. You need to have wingers who can bag tries instantly often from nothing,
and they're just danger. That's why I love to see Larmour thrown here. And then the other critique, like you touched on a little earlier on when you were talking about the selection of Henshaw at fullback being, what mould of player is similar to Rob Kearney, so that we can't change the mould. It's not unreasonable. It kind of goes to my point on my hesitation about Carberry filling for Johnny if Johnny goes down. I'd almost rather see Ross Byrne and have Carberry full-time fullback cover. That's sacrilege at the moment, the way things are going on, but I think there's possibly more potential in that. But what I would like to see in general, like Joe has had this great appreciation for depth as a solution to injuries. But it doesn't seem like he understands the value of depth, or he's appreciating right now the value of depth from a 23-man full squad, match day squad. Like,
that's a good argument. You've made that before. I was making it after the England game as well, where it's like if you see Conor Murray having that much of an off day, and very recently we played against the All Blacks and didn't have him available and used other options there with good success because you're trusting the systems. If you're seeing him be that awful compared to his own high standards, why aren't you making the change at 55 minutes? Why is it still taking to 72 minutes to try and break the game up and make it go in your favour? Because all that's happening by leaving him in there is his confidence probably draining with every botched kick, and it's still not working.
It's also like it's very systems oriented. There doesn't seem to be an appreciation that, like, you know, fine, you want to start Keith Earls is there doing one thing. Every time Larmour comes on in the right wing for an Ireland job, it seems like he's just trying to do what Keith Earls does. Keith Earls is probably better than Larmour at what Keith Earls does. But what can Larmour do? And that's the thing. There doesn't seem to be an appreciation of, you know, let's get Larmour into space. When we're playing a big team, like, Larmour's very much just slotting in. There's no playing him into space. There's no changing the game a bit, getting this young, very quick, very elusive guy's hands onto the ball. The same with, like, Sean Cronin, I would say. You know, when Sean Cronin comes off the bench, I'd love to see... You wouldn't want Murray Best in the wide channels for much of the game, but you'd love to see Nugget over there.
Yeah.
Let's bring him on and let's have it change the system. Let's adapt. Let's present a new picture to the opposition in the last 20, rather than just have guys filling in and doing the same job.
Yeah.
Which I think is sort of what you're seeing now.
Yeah.
And it's why, you know, ultimately, like, guys like whoever's replacing Conor Murray, or even Joey Carberry in most games when Sexton doesn't go down injured, ultimately the game gets into this point where, you know, it's tight, or it's a chess match or whatever it is, and Joe's thinking, I trust Murray to do Murray's job more than this guy, and I trust Sexton to do Sexton's job more than this guy. So the guy gets on at, you know, 74, 75 minutes and doesn't have a chance to impact anything.
Yeah, the game's already decided in whatever direction it's going.
Like, Joey Carberry had that, ultimately what won us the game, there was that great Joe Schmidt move, but Joey Carberry's try, that's an example of something that just a dynamic player can do with just pure X factor. It was just heads up, balls behind me, two lads.
It was two loose passes, in fact, that got us there.
Just gonna you know, run in between these two lads, accelerate through the contact and see what happens, and he explodes through it, catches the two boys off, and then he's gone. He's made a try, and that's like, he was on the field by accident. I don't think the starting team, that's not a try that's in Joe's script, and yet it won us the game. And there has to be sort of an appreciation of that, of just sort of getting guys getting guys into space, shaking up the game a bit.
For sure. But it's a good idea if you need to come from behind, as we were critical of before. It's like, you need to be presenting a new picture, because if your finishers are coming off the bench to do the same thing that's already been not successful for the first 60 minutes,
they're just going to do it less effectively than the starters.
So there are obviously, those are kind of the criticisms that we've come in, just eyeballed from our seats watching this Ireland team. I suppose we just hope for there to be more endeavour in terms of that distribution area, and probably, like, it would be nice to see us get a few more of those cheap tries, or seemingly cheap tries, compared to the absolute bludgeoning exercise in precision execution that we tend to have to go through to get those scores. It'd be nice to be able to just dynamically pilfer a few as well.
A wonderful contrast between the second and third tries in that department. You know, there's one that's come, you know, right off Joe's playbook. We do X off first phase,
which is excellent.
Like,
it's great. Still a great weapon.
Super thing to have in the arsenal. The NFL playbook of Joe Schmidt, and then the other one is just, hey ho, things are going wrong. Schmidt's playbook is turned, and there goes Joey. He's down the pitch. He's gone. Forget about it. And it's try time, and, you know, the same amount of points on the board.
Indeed.
And that is something that the All Blacks lean on.
Do all the time. And that's actually one of their main winning factors. Is just they can be having off days and do routinely and still snatch wins from just those few tries that they manage to just nick heads up.
And certainly, if you want to be winning World Cups, that's one thing that I would encourage them to do,
because it is impossible to be as on and as physical as is required for this Ireland team with this blueprint to be successful on a 7-game win streak basis. In that
the 7 games is a bit of a misnomer, though. It's like it's a win over Scotland in the first round,
then a bit of a tapering off,
and then it's the 3 games in a row. It's quarterfinal, which will be brutal no matter who we face, which will be one of those, you know, great epic games
where
people will go down injured, scrum halves will end up on the wing, we'll eke it out by 2 points, and then we'll have to play Wales in a week's time.
That's the blueprint, that's the hope.
But I mean, like, how big a recipe for disaster is that for Ireland? If you look at recent modern Irish rugby history, you know, an epic victory followed by a game against Wales. There's only one outcome there. You know, it's a loss to Wales.
It normally
smiling Gatland.
Yes.
You know, and that's it's certainly a thought. In the more short term, narrow view, the only other thing that I would say is that they still haven't seemed to vary up their exit, which is one thing.
Which is a concern. Especially when Connor's not Murray's not kicking as well as he has been. To try and mix that up would obviously be beneficial.
Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please like down below and subscribe for more videos. And please enter the comments section to join our conversation. Thanks.